English step by step, phrasal verbs within, step 1. Let's look at some examples. So here you can see 10 common phrasal verbs within. And you can see I've put some sentences so that you can see some context, because often it's difficult to understand the meaning of a phrasal verb unless you have a context. So the sentence gives you a context. Number 1, check in. We checked in at the airport. Now this is usually an activity which involves writing your name or checking your name on a list. You also have to check in at a hotel, for example. Number 2, join in. Let's look at the context. The song started and everyone joined in. In other words, they participated. So you can use this phrasal verb to describe any activity which involves a lot of people together doing an activity. For example, you can join in a football match. You can join in a choir. You can join in any activity which involves people doing things together. Number 3, fit in. This is an example of a phrasal verb which is difficult to understand, I think, because of the meaning of the individual words. Fit in. It's difficult to guess the meaning of the word unless you have a context. So in this sentence you can see children like to fit in at school. Now this means they like to feel comfortable with the other people in the school. They don't like to feel left out. They don't like to feel odd. They don't like to feel different from other people. So, in other words, they like to fit in. They like to feel the same as the other people. Number 4, sign in. This is a very common phrasal verb. You can hear this phrasal verb when you go to a hotel, for example, as in the example sentence. You can sign in at the reception of the hotel. In other words, you write your name. So the idea is similar to number 1. We checked in at the airport. You can sign in at the hotel. In other words, you write your name when you go into the hotel. When you arrive at a place, sometimes you have to check in, sometimes you have to sign in. Number 5, hand in. The example sentence. The students handed in their homework. Now this means they gave the homework to the teacher, or they gave the homework to the class. So hand in is when you finish a piece of work and you give it, using your hand, to the person who needs it. So hand in. So this phrasal verb can be used for other things. For example, you can hand in a book, you can hand in a message, etc. Number 6, put in, is an example of a phrasal verb which has more than one meaning. In this exercise, we'll look at the meaning in this example sentence. The engineers put in a new washing machine. Now, another word instead of put in could be installed or placed in the kitchen. They put in a new washing machine, they installed a new washing machine. So any workers in a house, they have to normally put something in. For example, the plumber will put in a shower, or the engineers, in this example, they will put in the washing machine, or the electricians will put in the electrical wires, for example. So put in is an informal way to say install. Number 7 is a very commonly used phrasal verb, fill in. And you can see the example. The students filled in a form. Well, in other words, they put in their name, address, and other information in the boxes in the form. And if you're a student, often you have an exercise or exercises where you have to write the answers to questions. In other words, you fill in the gaps. Number 8, bring in. Again, a phrasal verb with more than one meaning. In this case, we're looking at the example sentence. The government has brought in a new law. And this means they have introduced a new law. They have put into effect a new law. So bring in means to bring into effect. So this phrasal verb can be used for other things. For example, you can bring in a new policy. You can bring in new instructions. You can bring in new regulations, for example. Number 9, call in. Well, the verb call is normally used for using a telephone to contact someone. So in this case, it means using the telephone to contact someone to ask them to come to your house or to come to the place where you work. Let's look at the context sentence. You should call in a plumber to fix the pipes. That means you should bring in and employ a plumber to come to your house to fix the pipes. Another example, if you have a problem with your electricity, you should call in an electrician. In many situations where you have a problem, you have to call in an expert. Number 10 is another phrasal verb which has more than one meaning. Let's look at the meaning here in the example sentence. The teacher took in the student's homework. In other words, he accepted it. He received it. So this is related to the other example, number 5, hand in. So the students hand in their homework. In other words, they give it. And the teacher takes in the student's homework. In other words, he takes it. So these two phrasal verbs are related. So you can see sometimes it's difficult to find a synonym for a phrasal verb, but you can find words which have a similar meaning, or words which give the meaning in a sentence. Now look, you can see at the bottom here, I've put some alternative words for the phrasal verbs. For example, feel comfortable, install, register, introduce. And you can practice now by doing a matching exercise. Match these words at the bottom with the phrasal verbs in the list. Now, you can pause the video to do this exercise, and then we'll check it after you've had time to think about it. So now, let's match them up. Number 1, check in. We checked in at the airport. Now, I can see there are two possible words you can use. You could use register, or you could use record an arrival. Let's use this one, record an arrival. We checked in at the airport. In other words, we recorded our arrival at the airport. You could also use register, but let's talk about that later. Number 2, join in. The song started and everyone joined in. Now, the best word here is participated. Everyone participated. You could also say everyone took part. But if it's a song, then you can participate in the singing. Number 3, fit in. Children like to fit in at school. Now, this one is a tricky one because it's difficult to find words which convey the same meaning, but we can use, for example, feel comfortable. They like to feel comfortable with their friends. They don't like to feel strange or different from other people. They like to fit in other words, feel comfortable in the situation. Number 4, sign in. Now here we can use register, because when you sign in, you have to write your name and probably give your passport details, etc. And that's to register. Number 5, hand in. The students handed in their homework. In this case, we could use the word submit. Now this word is a little bit formal, so often we use the phrasal verb to avoid these formal words, but submit is a synonym. Number 6, the engineers put in a new washing machine. Well, in this case, we're talking about a machine, and install is another word you can use for the setting up of a machine. Number 7, fill in. The students filled in a form. Well, we could use this word complete. The students completed a form. Number 8, bring in. The government has brought in a new law. Well, in this case, introduced a new law would be a similar idea. Number 9, call in. You should call in a plumber to fix the pipes. Well, call in is to contact someone, and you also have to employ someone to do this job. So employ is a possible synonym or substitute word in this sentence. You should employ a plumber to fix the pipes. Number 10, take in. The teacher took in the students' homework. Well, in this case, receive. In this context, it means to receive. And of course, that's the opposite of submit. So, those are possible synonyms and words to explain the meaning. So we've looked at the meaning of these phrasal verbs, and now we can think about the form. Now, to think about the form, you can watch another video I've made called What is a Phrasal Verb, in which I cover these 6 points that are important to remember when you're talking about phrasal verbs. Now, most of these points are talking about verbs which have an object and verbs which have no object. Also, verbs which are separable and verbs which are inseparable. Now, you can find a link to this video in the screen above, and you can also find it below in the details box. So now let's look more at form and think about what kind of phrasal verbs do we have. Number 1, check in. Now this phrasal verb doesn't have an object. We checked in. There is no object. That means this is an intransitive phrasal verb. Also number 2, the song started and everyone joined in. So this can be transitive, but in this case it's intransitive. You can join in, no object. So intransitive. Number 3 is also intransitive. Children like to fit in at school. Number 4, also intransitive. You can sign in at the reception. Now the next 6 examples in the list are all examples with objects. For example, handed in their homework, put in a new washing machine, filled in a form, brought in a new law, call in a plumber, took in the student's homework. So these are all the objects of the phrasal verbs. So that means all of these phrasal verbs can be called transitive. Now, you can see I've made a list here of the alternative ways to say these phrasal verbs. Instead of handed in their homework, you can say handed their homework in. And again, put the washing machine in. In other words, the verb has 2 parts and you can separate them. You can put the object in the middle. Next example, filled the form in, brought a new law in, call a plumber in, took the homework in. So these are often called separable phrasal verbs, and all of these examples are separable because you can put the object in the middle before the second part of the phrasal verb. So this brings us to the end of this Step 1 video on phrasal verbs with in. You can move on to the Step 2 video and find a practice exercise, and then in the Step 3 video we'll go through the answers to that. Now remember, if you like the content of this video and you would like to see more, please click like and subscribe, and you can request a lesson in the comments below.